Hello and welcome, Scarlett. I'm so excited that you're here to chat with us about Pride. I'll just give you a second to introduce yourself if you could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history, a little bit about your fabulousness, and we'll proceed from there.
It's a lot to talk about. Hi, thank you. Um, let's see, I'm Scarlett. My pronouns are she, they. I was born and raised here in Peterborough-Nogojiwanong.
Oh, fantastic.
I've moved a lot all over the place. I came out as a trans woman in my teen years at
Fantastic.
PCBS when it was still a place. I miss that place.
Yeah.
Um, it was just really great. But I've been out for a long time, and when I came out kicking. I was politically active right from the get go. Where I'm like, wow, life's gonna be real hard from now on. I better do something about that. So I
Yes.
was a part of my high school's GSA. I did some early work with Parn. I think one of the early Pride parades. I did some filming for that. But
Oh, no way. That's fantastic.
yeah, if anyone ever finds that footage, I would be blown away to see it again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I then moved to Toronto for a little while where I did some work at the 519, and then
Oh,
I came
wonderful.
back to do my BSW at Trent. So I'm in my fourth year, very soon going to be a social worker, but I don't
Yeah.
think you necessarily need to be a registered social worker to do social work. I think lots of people do that every day. So currently, I am the chair and trans liaison at the Center for Women and Trans People. I do some volunteering here and there. I like community work. I really like being involved in community. Yeah,
Fantastic. I see you definitely as a community builder. You bring people together and create community together. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that isn't celebrated enough. And I think it needs to be.
I've never heard community builder before. I like that.
Yeah. It's very active, and that's exactly what you do. So it's fantastic.
Hmm.
So, an open-ended question for you. Feel free to take it
Yes.
how you will. What do you feel about pride? What does the word pride mean to you? How does it apply to the LGBTQ2IA community?
Hmm.
Uh, what does it mean in terms of like queerness and the what kind of nuances are there to that term pride?
Pride is, yes, exactly as complicated as your question kind of alluded to there. It strikes me in a whole lot of levels. And
Mhm.
first, it's just like raw joy. It is so much. It's pleasure. It's happiness. It's joy. It's all of those warm fuzzies of actually being proud, actually having something to stand on and be like, wow, look at this. Um, but it doesn't end there. It does have to go a lot deeper. That's built on something, and it's built on a lot of somethings. Actually, a lot of interconnected somethings. For me, it's a very active word as well. It's not passive.
Nicely said.
Um, Pride for me is realizing that our potential, that our abilities, um, our drive um, is political, is intentional, is directed towards things, and so pride kind of refers to also a responsibility to make
Oh,
sure that others can be proud too. Doing that community building, as you said, recognizing that like pride started with the riot. It started really with a revolution,
absolutely.
an ongoing revolution. Um, and so it's in order to kind of partake in the pride aspect, you also have to stand up for the revolutionary aspect too, to keep that momentum going for the next generations to come.
Nicely said. Absolutely. And so often people are like, but why rain on my parade? Why ruin my fun by having political stuff? And it's
Yeah.
like the whole point of the of Pride is to be political. Being queer, being in public spaces while being queer is a political move
Mhm.
in a very heterosexist society and a very like cis society as well.
And I think it's also really important not to shy away from the grief, to
Yeah.
not shy away from like the negative, like Yes, please rain on my parade. Please cry your tears. Please feel safe to do so.
Yeah,
Because the reason we're so proud is because of how hard it really is. And you can't just ignore the struggles of people, ignore the pain and the grief and the trauma that comes with this, just so you can have your happy moment. You have to
absolutely.
have both. You have to make space for both. So, absolutely, please rain on my parade, but
Yeah,
also throw a parade to rain on, right? Like,
absolutely. I love that complexity that we're getting at here. Like, I
mm,
think you're handling that complexity really strongly and really getting the nuances of that. How do you feel about the fact that often people erase that complexity, often focusing just on one articulation or pride just for them instead of pride for everyone?
um, I think you're getting onto something here, that the exclusionary aspects of it, right? Like we exclude sadness, we exclude negative emotions, we exclude things that might make us uncomfortable. Pride is all about unsettling and making things uncomfortable. And
Yeah,
when we really think about like whose comfort are we preserving versus whose discomfort are we bringing forth, it you start to see the powers at play, right? You start to see how whiteness, how cis heteronormativity, how ableism, how these systems are at play,
yeah,
trying to squash down what is uncomfortable. But we're here to be a thorn in that foot, essentially, right? To
yeah,
stand up and be like, no, like we should actually talk about these kinds of difficult conversations, and again, be proud to do so, to have the ability to do so.
yeah. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things is when people confusedly wander toward pride and are like, "What is this?" Because I think
Yes.
that's one of the areas where our work really centers, right? Like seeing that moment where people wander in and are like, "What's happening here?" Does that great work of disrupting the idea of heteronormativity, the idea of colonialism, the idea of whiteness, the idea of
Hmm.
ableism. There's a lot of disruptions that we can do by showing ourselves, by being present.
Hmm. By sticking out, right?
Absolutely.
Taking up space. One
Yeah,
of one of the most brilliant aspects of this, like, again, I have lots of complicated feelings about a parade taking place on stolen land, but
right.
even taking up space, when done politically, can be extraordinarily effective.
Absolutely.
Straight people on their way to work, and then they can't because the gay parade's there, and for a moment they have to remember that other people have different experiences than them, and it's worth getting to know these things, right?
Oh no, it's the gays.
Oh no.
That's fantastic. So you've got a lot of experience with, like, first of all, being queer in Peterborough, but also with Peterborough's pride. Can you
Mhm.
talk a bit about Nogojiwanong, Peterborough, and that experience of being queer in this town?
Yeah, totally. I was living in Toronto up until about 2016, and then I moved back to Peterborough due to some unforeseen circumstances. The night that Donald Trump was elected, and it
Yikes.
was, I know, right? It's like worst timing possible.
Yeah,
And I saw the town overnight become just a nightmare for
yeah,
so many people. And I was really sad about having to come back to Peterborough because I liked being in Toronto, but um, this was something that I could pour my energy into, pour my grief into, and just like hold that space with people who are also grieving for a myriad of other reasons, right? Um, and Peterborough Pride is one of those things that I like just immediately jumped into.
yeah,
So in 2017, I jump in with Peterborough Pride, and I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't really organized on this level before. I take kind of a back seat and I'm doing some volunteer stuff. I'm just kind of doing some communications. And I very quickly learned that, like, yes, it's really easy to throw a party. Yes, it's not easy actually. It's very difficult. And there's a lot of like problems there.
there is.
Um, but we need to do more than just throw a party. We need to do more than just have a parade. It is more than just, again, the celebration of pride. It's really complex, and being in that role was like mind boggling. And every year you would learn a little bit more where you're like, maybe I have a lot of opinions about, bigots who would come on to the Pride page, the Facebook page, and
Yeah.
leave whatever comments. I might want to react in a whole lot of ways. Um, but this is an opportunity instead to educate. This is an opportunity to create space for learning, because if there is no space for that, it's never going to happen. And again, that itself is a political choice, so it's kind of hard to know the right thing to do at the right time.
And
Um,
so often, so many of us are put in that role of educators, even those who don't want to be, just
mhm,
by being queer, we're put into that role of explain yourself to me. And like you and I are educators, and so that kind of work makes sense for us. But for the average queer person, it's like, maybe I don't want to educate you. Maybe I just want to live my life.
mhm.
It's so,
Right? Wouldn't it be nice just to kind of like relax into that role?
yeah,
Every now and then it's super important, but I think again it kind of carries with it that responsibility to make sure that the future generations can also have that experience.
exactly.
Um, yeah, I at the same time as joining Peterborough Pride, I'm in my social work program, and we're doing some research, like learning about research. So I'm
Ooh,
like, why not fuse the two? And so for my second through fourth years of working at Peterborough Pride, this 3-year project of doing the research into like what does a 5-year plan look like for Pride? What does the future of Pride really look like? What can we, with the limited resources and really just people, it's a very small group that's running it.
yeah,
Um, what can we like hope to accomplish? Um, we partnered actually with the Center for Women and Trans People, where I'm actually working now, um, to do a really in-depth research project into the experiences of racialized people in Peterborough accessing all sorts of spaces. But
yeah,
in particular, there was a section on Peterborough Pride as well, or just queer spaces.
yeah.
So that was like part of the like work I was doing there. And then in the last 2 years or 1 year, I can't remember what year we're on. Um, it was just about making it happen at all, because when COVID hit, it was hard just to exist, let alone do all
Absolutely.
of this other stuff on top of that. Um, and then, yeah, no, this year I've actually taken a step down to focus on my last year at Trent. So I'm no longer with Peterborough Pride. I am still with the Center for Women and Trans People, as I mentioned. I think
Fantastic.
it's about where my capacity is, but yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about where your research was indicating, like what it indicated in terms of racialized folks in particular? Because I imagine like a lot of the queer spaces in Peterborough and Nogojiwanong tend to be very, very white, tend to be very also very cis gay men
Yeah.
rather than including like a variety of folks and very ableist as well.
Yeah. All of those things came up in actually Ria Shahi was the one who did the actual research itself. Peterborough Pride was just like a backing, and like the work that I did kind of supplemented her work, but she was really the driving force behind that. Um, but yeah, her research indicated, yeah, like Peterborough Pride is very white, like the event spaces are very white. They are extraordinarily inaccessible, like extraordinarily inaccessible. And that is a whole combination of factors, anywhere from the buildings themselves being very old to Peterborough Pride not hiring ASL interpreters. Actually, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
Um, a myriad of oversights that are, yeah, indicated in the research, that um, the racialized people who were actually participating in this just found it like extraordinarily uncomfortable to be here.
yeah, right?
Um, and so we took that and started doing a lot more like um, black centric events in particular, um,
Oh,
with the
fantastic.
help. Oh, sorry, what's that?
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, with the help of people like Niambi Tree, Mona, Ahmed, everyone over at BLM. We had like it began to diversify, but I think there's a long way to go there.
absolutely.
Um, Also, just want to like shout out like Sahira Q for being um, like a wonderful, supportive like community member who has really done so much for again our queer scene and um, making a safe space for racialized people to express themselves in that scene.
Absolutely. And Sahira's just fantastic.
Absolutely.
I just like bringing drag to a whole new level here in Peterborough and really like and also I mean just doing that community building work as well.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about before, that often goes unrecognized.
Mm-hmm. No, they really it's no shade to the queens that were already here. I remember going to them. I still visit them. But like Sahira really reinvented what that looks like in Peterborough.
Yeah,
It has exploded. There are more queens than I can name now.
right?
Like I am so happy for that.
Yeah. Oh, so fantastic. So you mentioned the future of Pride. Where do you see Pride going from here? Or I guess more aptly, where do you want Pride to go from here? Where does it need to go from here?
Um, there's a few questions there.
Yeah,
It
sorry.
needs to um, become as inclusive as it absolutely can be. I think that yeah, places that we hold events or that Pride holds events rather, um, being inaccessible is not um, doesn't cut it anymore. It
Right.
never cut it in the first place, right? Like we can't continue to find reasons to not prioritize this.
Yeah.
Um, we need interpreters. We need um, all sorts of accommodations and more focus on accommodations um, as a start.
Yeah.
I think Pride um, could also be like more revolutionary, more radical, more, you know, kind of getting back to those grassroots. Like, what are we really doing this for? What are we celebrating if not, um, if there is none of that responsibility part coming with it as well that we kind of mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Um, Personally, I would like to see um, more trans women. I feel very isolated in this town, specifically trans women leadership, people who have lots of experience, people who have, you know, um, been doing this for years, who have been around the block and know what to look for, because it's so easy, I've realized, to be exploited.
Yeah.
I could go into a position and they could be like, "Yeah, you're the trans woman that we're gonna hire," and I don't even know what I'm doing there.
Right.
Um, and so I have to leave, and I'm just like, I would like to see more experienced trans women because I know they're out there, um, but it's hard to find them, and even that, even still, you still have to make a safer space for them to even want to come out of hiding.
Absolutely. And we need mentors, right? Like that's one
Yeah.
of the challenging things is that there's not a lot of mentors for us in this community. There's not a lot of folks who are older than us who can give us those years of experience. And I don't know about you, but that's one of the things I really searched for was some folks who are in that mentor position, who don't want to exploit us, but actually want to share resources and share knowledge.
I think there's a really hard, sad truth that there aren't a lot of trans women elders because they are dead.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's something that doesn't necessarily come up very easily in any kind of queer conversation. The idea that um, government policies, the AIDS crisis, housing crisis after housing crisis, recession after recession, all of these things hit the most marginalized people hardest. And in particular, the AIDS crisis just was devastating for the queer community. And I think even a lot of younger queer people don't realize how all encompassing it really was. I barely even know that, right? Like I'm just
Yeah.
after that crisis. Um, and I'm realizing that, like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of people older than me. And so the people who are like are precious. We need them. They need our support, and we need their wisdom, their guidance, and their mentorship, right? Um, so that kind of thing definitely could be prioritized.
Yeah.
Really should be prioritized.
And relatedly, how do we work as mentors for younger folks as well? What do you see us needing to do in order to bring like make sure that younger folks are getting that mentorship that we didn't have?
The middle us, we're the middle people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard question. It's something that I like wrestle with every day, right? Like
Yeah.
how do I bring the messages that I never had to the people who don't know they're missing,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, what is it that I needed, and then what is relevant today? Back in the
Absolutely.
day before internet, before large communities, it depended on word of mouth of how to get into places like the Clark Institute before it became CMHA.
Yeah.
Um, Before we had all of these medicalization programs for trans people, trans youth, you just had to know what to say to the right people at the right time. And so a lot of that information isn't as relevant anymore, but other information that I'm still learning now um, is becoming a lot more relevant. Um, Now it's a lot more, I think, about like how do we socialize and move through a cisgendered world that is not built for us. It's still not there. How do we um, get jobs and keep them? How do we get housing and keep that? How do we um, yeah, I'm not sure. It's a tough question, yes.
Especially since like so often like and I think this is a systemic issue. We're put in the position where we have to focus so much on basic survival that it
Yeah.
becomes really challenging to do all the work on increasing things, on making things better for the next generation. Because so often we're just like, okay, food, housing, support
Mhm.
systems, and basic contact. And then it very much means that we're in survival mode and the next generation isn't getting that access to us because
Mhm.
they're needing to survive.
Absolutely. I feel that someone who doesn't like have a whole lot of familial support. I don't speak
Yeah,
with my biological family anymore. Um, it's hard.
yeah,
I'm going to school full time, and I work anywhere between 5 to 7 jobs just to stay alive.
yeah,
And with the amount of hours that takes up, I don't have a lot of time for laundry, to make dinner, to you know take care of my space. And then on top of that, I have to provide that mentorship for people because it's life saving at times, right? Like
absolutely,
I can't stop or deny a call at 2 in the morning that I know is coming from someone suffering from suicidality.
absolutely.
There's no way I could say no to that. But also that's several hours out of my night, if not the whole night gone.
Yeah.
Makes it hard.
Mentorship is difficult, and I think people forget that because they think of mentorship as like a 9 to 5 situation where you're advising someone very quickly on how to do things.
Yeah.
But it's very much more about the compassion, working together, and those 2 o'clock in the morning calls, right?
That sense of community, right? It isn't that I pick up the phone and I say the right words. It's the fact that I've picked up the phone.
Hmm. Hmm.
It doesn't matter what words I say. It's just being there. It's just taking time out of my day, even if it comes, sometimes as a sacrifice to me, to make sure that someone else isn't forgotten about.
Absolutely. So where
Mhm.
do we go from here? How do we get Pride to where it needs to be?
A lot of people. We need a
Yeah.
lot of people joining in and giving their time and effort and support. A lot of people just taking their time out of their day to educate themselves on something outside of their own experience.
Yeah.
Like I'm a queer trans woman of some neurodivergencies, of some chronic illnesses,
Yeah.
but that doesn't cover even a small portion of all the things that are out there that
Right.
intersect with my identities, that inform them, that influence them, and that like we stand in solidarity with one another, right? Like that's if I can understand how to support someone else and they can understand how to support me, we all do better.
Exactly.
So we go from here um, with fire in our bellies, right? Like all we can do
Yeah.
is just share this this internal drive that so much of the queer community has in spades. It's one
Yeah.
of our powers. It's just we are so passionate. We're so passionate because we understand a lot of what's at stake. And so if we can take that energy and share it and indulge in it and um, use it to learn about other people who can then also share it and indulge in it and share, we do better. All of us do better.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you've seen this year's theme, but we decided on the theme of joy and resistance to try
Hmm.
to encapsulate those two aspects of pride. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, can you talk a little bit about queer joy? What does queer joy mean for you? How do you feel that sense of joyousness around your queer identity?
Um, Joy, I think, comes from one, feeling supported, knowing that you have a community, because when you don't have those things, it's very hard to feel joy. When you
Absolutely.
have that foundational like basic needs taken care of, joy comes a lot easier when you can celebrate in the diversity of experience of when I think of queer joy, I think of this little event my friends and I threw in the summer where we just had like a picnic in the grass, but everyone brought their craft.
Yeah,
So someone brought a guitar, someone brought all their art supplies, someone brought a baseball and some mitts. I brought my tarot deck, and we all
yeah,
just shared like our passions together, and we all got to experience a little bit of everything.
I
And
love
for me,
that.
that was blissful. That was so joyful. And I think everyone who went there also kind of felt the same. It's contagious,
Yeah,
um, but it really does rely on that foundational aspect. Like we need to be able to take care of each other's first in
absolutely.
order to also, get to that point.
I love the spontaneousness of that event as well. Just basically being
Mhm.
like, bring the stuff that brings you happiness. Like just
Mhm.
hang out in the park, have some snacks, have some like crafts, do some joyous things. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was honestly like the best part of the summer. It made the whole summer that much better.
And I think we need events like this throughout the year as well. When we do that focus on Pride Week, it often means that for a lot of folks, they're not getting that access to the community. Folks that come
Mhm.
out later, folks that happen to be busy in September, aren't getting that access. And so I love this idea of spontaneous, like queer events.
Mhm. We definitely I know in one of the years I was at Pride, we tried to strive for a monthly event at least. That
Fantastic.
like the Pride is only a 1 week celebration, but it happens all year long. Like I'm still queer a month later, a week earlier, like all of these things.
We're not
Um,
werewolves.
right? Um, no, like Pride happens all the time. But particularly when COVID hit and the energy just wasn't there, and there weren't that many members because everyone has to take a step back to take care of themselves. Um, that fell a little bit more to other community groups.
Yeah,
I still see a lot of queer events. Certainly, Sahira Q put on so many of them.
absolutely.
Um, but we like when I was at Pride, we weren't able to keep up with that same quota anymore.
That's another good step for the future is that we need to have that queerness throughout the year. We need to
Mhm.
celebrate throughout the year. We need to also do that, and that's the other part, resistance throughout the year as well,
Yeah.
because otherwise will be subsumed by all of the negativity around us. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about resistance. I know this is something you feel very passionate about. Uh,
Yes.
and yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how we resist, how we bring revolution into our pride events and into ourselves as queer folks?
Yes, of course. While you were talking about that, the idea of resistance, resisting even negativity,
Mhm.
um, my mind flipped a script on it actually, and I was thinking about earlier in our conversations about how it's okay to kind of embrace that negativity. Because
Yes.
in doing so, we become better at it. We
Mhm.
become more experienced with it. We become more emotionally developed. Um, and understand how to navigate when things are really hard. And I
Abs-
think that's a great deal of what resistance looks like is not shying away from that hard, but instead embracing it intentionally, so going to those spaces and embracing it so that it doesn't overwhelm you, so that it can't like squash you down.
Yeah.
um, I think like a stereotypical resistance would be like screaming into a megaphone at a rally,
Yeah.
marching in the streets. um it might be like civil acts of disobedience, maybe you chain yourself to a fence or something like that. um but I think resistance can also happen on an internal level as well,
Absolutely.
where we go into those uncomfortable places um of the grief, of the sadness, of other people's grief and sadness, and how awkward that is. We go into the awkwardness in a brave space, in a brave way, and we resist the urge to succumb to it, and we just feel it all the way through.
Instead of
Um,
pressing it down and erasing it,
yeah,
actually experiencing our grief and sharing that. Yeah,
yes,
I really love that.
yes, thank you. Um, yeah, I think that's yeah. Sorry, my mind was just slipping there.
No, that's so powerful, and I'm really glad you mentioned that and mentioned the importance of us not seeing basically the bad emotions as
Mhm.
bad, and
Yeah.
instead embracing them and being like, we can be sad, we can have collective grief, and we
Mhm.
have reasons for that.
Yeah, it's not a moral problem to embrace bad emotions. Like bad emotions does not equal evil. It's just
Exactly.
uncomfortable. And pride is all about embracing the uncomfortable and just waving it around, right? Like
Yes.
having fun with it. It's okay to go to a vigil. You don't know that community very well, but going there and just openly crying with them, sitting in those uncomfortable moments and like letting that be your reality for a few minutes. It'll
How
teach you,
powerful. Yeah.
right?
And especially like that collective outpouring of tears is really powerful. We need that catharsis, right? Like we need to come together and experience that collective grieving. I think that's really brilliant. Yeah.
Mm. No,
Oh,
I completely agree.
so, and I mean, also, like we think about often grief, but also anger. Often we downplay anger and view anger as a problem, but anger is really
Yeah.
productive. Anger is how we make change.
Anger is until it's weaponized against someone in a way that should, intentionally harm them.
Mhm.
Anger is really good. It's a very healthy emotion. Um, I definitely get that feeling a lot as a trans woman who's been, yelling, and I'm so angry a lot of the time, um, because I feel like there's an injustice. There is an injustice, and I think that's okay to be angry about. And me being angry doesn't necessarily mean I'm angry with you in particular. I'm just angry, and it's okay to hold space for that. Um, I get that a lot as a trans woman, that I'm the loud trans woman, I'm the angry trans woman, I'm unruly. Um, and it's because people would rather put that on me than recognize how their own discomfort is coming from their own unresolved um, fears, right? Their
Absolutely.
discomforts that they're not willing to embrace, they'll put on to me.
Yeah,
They'll put on to other trans women, they'll put on to any kind of marginalized person who speaks their mind unapologetically.
exactly.
Sometimes they get upset about it. That's one of the reasons why I say that, like, the best kind of resistance there is that internal resisting of the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Get in there, feel uncomfortable, and resist the urge to fall into those old habits.
Embrace the uncomfortable.
Yes, I think that's the theme of this interview.
I love it. So are there any points you want to add just to wrap up as we're finishing our interview? Anything that you feel is like really important for us to know as a community, really important for us to think about and important steps for us to take for the future?
It's a good question. I'm thinking about it. I've said so much of what I've wanted to say.
Yeah,
Um, Again, what comes to mind is that we really, really need to cherish trans women. Trans
yeah,
women have done everything for the community and got so little back. Every single year, TDOR is just, TDOR is the Trans Day of Remembrance, happens every November 20th, and it's just a time for people to recognize the trans people we have lost and fight like hell as well for the living, the people who are still here but really need support. Um, and when you look at the numbers of who is being lost, it's trans women of color,
absolutely.
predominantly, sex workers, predominantly, people in these really precarious, vulnerable positions where power is just only too easy to take advantage of them, to do awful things to them. Um, it's incredibly important that we prioritize people in these vulnerable positions: trans women of color, sex workers, disabled folk, neurodivergent folk, people who are in those uncomfortable areas for so many of the rest of us.
Mhm,
Because uncomfortability is also somewhat relative, right? Like,
absolutely.
these traditionally uncomfortable areas, we need to support them. Um, and like at all costs, like at all costs, because without them, then so many of us are lost. We lose
Absolutely.
the movement, and we can't lose that now. We're so
Especially
close.
exactly, right? There's so much to do, and yet we're doing so much already. And
Yeah,
especially lifting up the voices of folks that have been traditionally silenced is so important.
yeah,
And I think hearing those voices is so important right now and listening cleanly, listening without assumptions.
hmm,
Yeah,
yeah. That active listening, right? Not having the story in your mind ready to go. You're just
exactly.
there, open, empty, listening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Scarlett. This has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you for all the work you do in our community and for the teachings that you share as well. I think that's really important. I'm really honored that we got a chance to chat. And thank you for sharing your voice with so many folks.
Thank you so much too, Derek. I really appreciate that. It's been an honor to work with you. We wanted to do this for so long, and now I'm excited it's happening. Or it's happened.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you too.